And welcome into the roundtable. And if you've been following the news of recent note, the Forward Air Omni merger may be on the rocks, as it were. The stay of the injunction was lifted on Wednesday in terms of the two parties can now get together and finish it. However, as a result, Forward is considering its rights and obligations under the merger agreement, including potentially exercising its right to terminate the merger agreement, as Forward Air said in a news release. And then just following that the next day, Omni believes the merger agreement is legally binding and intends to enforce the merger agreement and close the transaction as expeditiously as possible. Two differing opinions on how things could possibly go. Joining us to talk about it, Matthew Leffler, the armchair attorney, joining us here from Chicago, Illinois. Matt, as you look at the situation, we've covered this a little bit in how things have gone down. It's not a surprise that mergers and acquisitions fall through, but this one got close, and now all heck has broken loose.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what the activist shareholders who initially filed the lawsuit in Tennessee wanted. They wanted to slow the process down, get a minute to breathe, allow them to use any means necessary to shoot this merger down. So at the end of the day, we talked about this last week, the injunction was going to get lifted. There was no way that they had done a wrong pathway for doing this deal. The board of directors for both companies said this was what they wanted to have happen. But the activist shareholders paused it, froze things. And now that it's been frozen, people have had a time to digest what this deal was going to mean. And the longer you delay a deal, the less attractive it is for the company who wants to make the acquisition. So now Forward's saying, well, we don't think that Omni is playing fair. We don't think they're doing what they're supposed to do. Omni says, of course we are. We know we are. And we're going to seek what we call specific performance. They're going to want this deal to be consummated. That is where we are right now. And it's absolutely fascinating to watch this M&A play out in real time.
Yeah, so looking at this, what's the legal fallout here as well? Because looking at the transaction having gone through, there were obviously fees and charges that were coming to Forward Air in the coming days and months that are large, to put it mildly.
Yeah. So $100,000 a day. Yeah, $100,000 a day right now.
How does that play out here in terms of, obviously, Forward? It looks like they want to not do this deal. Omni's going to try to hold their feet to the fire.
Forward may not have a choice. I mean, that's the reality of Omni, what they're looking to do. Omni is going to seek to execute this merger. That would be what they call specific performance, forcing the deal. Many of our viewers may remember when Elon Musk said, I'm not going to buy Twitter. You can't make me buy Twitter. And then the Delaware Chancery Court said, yeah, we can make you buy Twitter. And then he bought Twitter. So if Forward Air wants to hold themselves up and say, we don't believe that Omni is being fair and doing what they're supposed to do under the merger agreement, they may try to terminate it. But that would then bring more litigation. Omni is looking to get this deal done. They have great terms. They're excited for the control that they're going to have over Forward Air and then the surviving entity. But the reality is, to your point, Forward Air is spending $100,000 a day right now in interest, $100,000 a day. That goes up by another $70,000 a day starting on Monday. So this is very, very expensive. If this deal doesn't happen, I think you're going to see a bunch of people turn over at the top of Forward Air, because if this deal doesn't make sense now, then it's not going to make sense in a week from now. And getting into litigation of trying to figure out who broke the agreement and who didn't break the agreement is going to be incredibly expensive, very disruptive to customers, and people aren't going to want to, follow along with something like this.
So what is essentially, again, if things go forward in terms of the deal, it's still trying to get done. Obviously, Forward Air still saying that they, or at least the news release saying they could decide to terminate this agreement and play themselves out legally there as well. What do they have to prove in order to say this deal wasn't, or this deal shouldn't happen? And what does Omni have to prove specifically to say, hey, you signed on the dotted line, we're doing this?
Yeah, so Forward Air didn't fully explain what they think Omni didn't do. So if they decide to say, our position is you didn't do certain things under the contract, that's going to go to court or arbitration or some place where it's going to be mediated. Someone's going to figure out whether or not they broke the agreement. Omni's going to have to prove that they performed, that they provided everything that Forward Air wanted. And because this is like a very specific thing, if Forward Air can't prove that Omni made a breach of the contract, that deal happens. That deal takes place. That deal is consummated. Now you have the people over at Omni a part of Forward Air. So this is the reality. If they're unable to prove that a contract has been broken, this deal continues to go forward. And the leadership teams and all the people who are getting frustrated and the shareholders who are trying to fight this, they're not going to get a say, because that was what the whole litigation in Nashville was about. We wanted to say, we want to sit at the table, and they didn't get a seat because they made this deal structured in such a way to keep them out.
Spencer Tenney, the CEO and president of the Tenney Group, also joining us here as well. Spencer, thanks so much for taking the time here. First off, surprised at what's going on here between Forward Air and Omni, and obviously not all mergers and acquisitions go through as planned. And in fact, maybe even less than or a small percentage actually do. But what do you see as far as how this has started to play out?
Well, and this had some hair on it and has had some hair on it for the last several weeks. So I can't say that I'm totally surprised. This is just the reality of kind of the pros and cons of being a publicly traded company. You have serious access to capital, but when it comes to executing transformational change, we're seeing some of the challenges of actually seeing that come to fruition. And so not totally surprised, very intrigued of what's developing and anxious to see what happens next.
As you look at it, obviously, as this thing came to fruition and was announced, and we got the shareholders that didn't want, or that wanted to try and take this to court, or at least try to get a vote in terms of what they were going to be a part of in the first place. How tough a deal was this to get done in the first place, given the multitude of different types of deals and mergers and acquisitions that can be done? Was this on the difficult end?
I think in a different environment, maybe we're not having the same conversation, but I would say the primary characteristic of the market right now, there's just a pronounced sensitivity to transaction structure and leverage. And that is the primary theme of this deal. It just has a ton of leverage. And for that reason, it's going to be scrutinized heavily. But there's plenty of deals that have high leverage, and the valuation or the investment thesis is tied to post-transaction operational synergies, as this one appears to have. It's just, I think that in the current environment, this is very challenging for folks looking at this to not scrutinize it.
Yeah, definitely there as well. So as you look at it, obviously this is dealing with laws that are specific to Tennessee in terms of how this is going to play out, or how this could have played out in litigation, or if it will or not, we'll wait and see. But as far as other deals like this with publicly traded companies, what is the lesson learned here for others that are possibly thinking about being in this kind of situation and doing a merger and acquisition where you might have, again, shareholder, for lack of a better word, mutiny in terms of trying to stop a deal like this?
Yeah, the reality is this: every transaction, whether it's publicly traded or whether it's private, when there's a sign and close element, there are significant execution risks. And so the keys to being a part of a transaction like that is to make sure that you've surrounded yourself with the right legal representation to limit as much exposure as possible, whether you're the buyer or whether you're the seller. So folks that understand this industry and the nuances, you want to try to eliminate the whole thing altogether. You want to try to make it as seamless as possible. But for large public transactions like that, that's almost unavoidable. All the more reason to make sure that you have your legal exposure buttoned down as much as possible.
Matt, given what could possibly happen here, again, if Omni is successful in trying to keep the feet to the fire for Forward Air and trying to get this done, we've already talked about the fact that Forward Air has $100,000 due a day and $70,000 due a day coming up on Monday. Outside of that, what kind of a legal challenge are they facing, not only monetarily, but just as a legal argument?
Omni is in a great position for this deal. They're bringing all this debt that Ford's going to take over for them. And this is important for them to get this thing done. They'll be one of the largest voting blocks, ultimately, if those shares get converted to voting shares. We talked about it in another episode. But they need to make this thing happen. And they're going to prove in court as best they can that they have fulfilled their obligations under the contract. If they can show that they have fulfilled those obligations, this deal gets done. Like, this is specific performance. This is, you said this, we said this, We both agreed, now do the deal. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be watching very carefully to see how other shareholders at Forward react, because obviously they're getting uncomfortable. Their customers are uncomfortable. But if Omni can prove that they didn't break the contract, I don't see a way this deal does not happen. And it should be something that everyone should be mindful of. As Spencer pointed out, I mean, this is a highly leveraged deal, but a lot of deals are highly leveraged. So the idea is we're going to make something better when it's all said and done. So we're going to be watching very carefully what happens between Omni and Forward Air as they decide, who broke the contract, who didn't break the contract, and what the deal looks like when it's all said and done.
Just got about a minute left here. Spencer, what do you think what are you looking for in the next coming days and weeks in terms of how this could possibly play out in terms of either a linchpin or some sort of a key point that both players obviously would like to have control of as they try to make a decision on their own?
I think both parties will do whatever they can to arrive at a quick solution, because the legal cost associated with this dragging on will be astronomical. And so getting clarity and arriving at something quickly not only protects the interest of all shareholders, but also, like I said, mitigates transaction expenses that don't create value. And I think that's what's going to be critical here.
Matt, is there any possibility for maybe even a change in the deal in and of itself? Just say, let's appease the masses, if you will. Quickly.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, Omni's not going to go back to the table. They're going to say this deal was struck. We've all agreed to it. We may see shareholder derivative lawsuits when it's all said and done on the Forward Air folks if they don't think this was good for the overall company. But no one's going to renegotiate this thing. They're going to say, we did it all. All we're looking for is, did you get the financing? Did you get these pieces done? Let's get the deal closed. No one's going to open this thing back up, in my opinion.
This is definitely going to be an interesting thing to watch over the course of hopefully not the next few months, but hopefully weeks, and as they try to come to a resolution. Spencer and Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, we'll take a short break and come back with more for now after this.